Hey guys, tonight we slip into a Europe where nightfall itself feels heavier than stone. The year is somewhere in the 1300s, and the sun's disappearance doesn't just mean bedtime. It means stepping into a world of drafty rooms, flickering hearths and superstitions that could keep you awake, even when exhaustion drags at your eyes. You might think a simple act like lying down to rest would be safe, but back then, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The medieval day ends early. As the last rays sink, candles and torches sputter to life, but they burn costly tallow, so most homes keep them scarce. Darkness takes over fast, thick, and absolute, and you find yourself retreating indoors, clutching wool or cloaks against the creeping chill. Without glass windows, the night air seeps through shutters, like an uninvited guest, carrying every groan of timber and howl of wind straight into your bones. Unlike the buzzing neon and city noise, you might know this quiet is total except for the crackle of a fire, the scuttle of mice in the rushes, or the low murmur of your family praying aloud, just in case unseen forces are listening. You sit in a one-room hut, where the hearth glows weakly at the center. Shadows crawl up the rough plastered walls, distorting beams into shapes that make children whisper about spirits. Out in the village, the church bell tolls, marking curfew, and patrolmen will soon be pacing the streets. Night doesn't just belong to sleep, it belongs to danger, crime, and superstition. For peasants, that means shuttering every crack and trusting the fire not to die. For nobles, in drafty stone halls, it means tapestries and heavy curtains to keep both the cold and the evil out. The oddest thing is how everyone treats the night like a battle to be endured. Beds are lumpy straw sacks or creaking wooden frames, but it isn't just the discomfort that shapes the way you rest. It's the belief that lying too flat makes you vulnerable. Lying down, people whisper, leaves the body open to bad air or spirits pressing on the chest. Sitting propped against pillows or a carved wooden headboard feels safer, more alert, as though you might rise at once if death comes knocking. And death, in this age of plague and famine, isn't just metaphorical. It is always nearby, never sleeping. The sensory details layer thick smoke, curls upward from the hearth, scratching at your throat, but its warmth is better than none. The rushes on the floor smell faintly of mildew and livestock, a reminder that tomorrow's cleaning never really arrives. Even the silence isn't silent. Outside, a dog barks, a baby stirs, and the wind presses cold fingers under the door. Imagine sleeping in an airport terminal with the heat turned off and no headphones to drown the sound. That's a decent modern comparison. You might think this ritual of bracing against nightfall sounds exhausting, but for medieval families, it was routine. They called it prudence. You might call it paranoia. Either way, you can almost feel the tension in the room, everyone wrapping tighter, shifting closer, pretending that comfort exists. And yet, historians still argue whether the posture of sitting up was driven more by fear of spirits or by medical theories of the time. As you huddle in that dim glow, the hours stretch long. Sleep won't be one gentle plunge into dreams, but a staggered surrender. First there is first sleep, the deep early rest. Then later, long before dawn, the room will stir again. But for now, under the uneasy hush of medieval nightfall, you draw your cloak tight and try not to notice how every shadow seems to lean just a little too close. The bed you lower yourself onto tonight isn't what you'd call a bed at all. It's a sagging sack of straw laid across a wooden frame, or if you're poorer, just a pile of rushes on the dirt floor. The straw crunches when you shift, releasing a dry dust that makes you cough. Beneath it, fleas stir, ready to nibble as soon as your body heat invites them out. The truth is, medieval beds were less about comfort and more about negotiating with misery. You don't stretch out luxuriously. You fold into yourself, knees drawn tight, trying to limit contact with whatever's scratching, crawling, or digging under your skin. Picture a mattress showroom today with endless soft choices and salespeople telling you about orthopedic support. Now erase all of that. What you get instead is hay stolen from a neighbor's barn, flattened over months until it offers no cushion at all. And yes, it smells an earthy blend of mildew sweat and livestock. In some households, the same straw bed is shared by several people, so every turn and shuffle is felt by everyone. If you thought a squeaky dorm bunk was bad, imagine 5 people rolling over on the same crunchy mattress, stuffed with half-rotted reeds. Then there's the cold. Floors are just packed dirt, and at night the chill rises from the ground like a ghost that refuses to leave. Even when you climb onto a straw bed, the cold seeps up through the frame, numbing your back until your bones ache. Some families toss rushes across the floor, hoping to make a barrier, but these quickly mold and rot, adding a swampy smell to the already unpleasant air. Historians still argue whether peasants replaced these rushes regularly or simply layered fresh ones over the old, creating a thick composting carpet alive with bugs. Either way, it wasn't exactly a luxury. For the wealthy, things weren't as glamorous as you might imagine either. Nobles slept in larger carved wooden frames, often with curtains to trap warmth. But even here, comfort was relative. Those beds were stuffed with wool feathers or straw, and though softer, they were hardly free of pests. Bed bugs thrived in the seams of embroidered linens, and fleas didn't respect class divisions. The difference was mainly in appearance: ornate canopies, painted wood fabrics, dyed in expensive colors. A peasant's bed was practical. A lord's bed was a performance of wealth. Either way, the sleeper woke scratching. The sensory palette of the medieval bed is unmistakable. The rough wool blanket scratches against your skin. Smoke from the hearth has settled into the fabric, leaving a sour, ashy tang in the air. The smell of sweat straw and unwashed linen clings to everything, because laundry in winter is almost impossible. If you've ever forgotten gym clothes in a bag for too long, multiply that by 10 and then sleep in it. That's the medieval bedding experience, and yet families pressed on. Children curled against parents, grandparents tucked at the edges, servants or cousins squeezed in wherever space allowed. This wasn't just about comfort, it was survival. Body heat became insulation. You might lie there listening to your brother snore in your ear and your sister's elbow poking your ribs, but without them, you'd freeze. Even animals sometimes joined the bed, or at least the room, adding their warmth to the mix. In a sense, everyone became part of a single desperate organism, sharing heat and air in a space that was never truly dark or silent. Now think of this: you can't just sprawl out flat. Doing so invites drafts, aches, and in some beliefs, danger. So you half sit, half recline, propped against the wall, or a wooden headboard if you're lucky to have one. Some slept in chairs or benches, resting their heads on folded arms. It feels awkward at first, but eventually, your muscles learn the habit. Medical theory of the time even supported it. Physicians warned that lying flat allowed dangerous vapors, those invisible humors, to pool in the body, suffocating the sleeper. Sitting up was thought to keep the airways clear and the spirits at bay. Comfort was never the goal. Survival and superstition ruled the night. As you drift toward uneasy sleep, the sounds of your bedroom follow you. The fire spits and cracks, and somewhere in the rushes a mouse scurries. A child coughs. A pig snorts from the corner. The roof creaks in the wind. There is no silence, only layers of noise. Modern sleepers complain about city sirens or upstairs neighbors. Medieval sleepers had their own symphony livestock weather humans, all woven into a single restless soundtrack. Quirky details make the scene even stranger. Some households placed shoes or knives near the bed to ward off spirits, convinced that evil creatures prowled the night. Others hung charms or herbs, hoping lavender or rosemary might encourage peaceful rest. A few believed that turning the bed to face a certain direction could protect against nightmares. None of it truly worked, but when your nights are all ready, this miserable hope is as valuable as warmth. You shift again, straw crunching beneath you, and a flea takes the opportunity to bite. You slap at it, but there are more. The truth is, a medieval bed wasn't a refuge. It was another battlefront. Every night you wrestled the cold, the bugs, the smells, and your own aching muscles. And every morning you woke stiff, scratched, but alive. And in this world, alive was victory enough. The bizarre part isn't just the sitting posture or the bad bedding. It's that people thought this was normal. Children grew up in it, nobles endured it behind silken curtains, and peasants accepted it as part of life. You might think your mattress is lumpy, or your sheets are itchy, but compared to 1300s Europe, you're practically royalty. And so, another medieval night rolls on straw, rustling fire, dimming bodies pressed close, all of you, half sitting, half sleeping, waiting for dawn to creep back through the shutter cracks. Comfort never comes, but somehow rest does, strange, fragile, and always interrupted. You lean back against the wall, propped by a lumpy cushion or a rolled-up cloak, because lying flat feels like asking for trouble. It isn't just habit, it's survival. In the 1300s, people believed that sleep wasn't safe unless your body stayed upright. A flat position meant fluids could pool in your chest, making you vulnerable to suffocation. Doctors of the day, guided by humoral theory, warned that the body's vapors would choke a person if they stretched out fully. To sit to rest at an angle was to guard against death itself. It sounds bizarre to you now, but to them it was science. Imagine going to bed in a world where you're convinced lying down might literally kill you. Your bed isn't even designed for stretching flat anyway. Frames are short, so you sit curled knees, bent head, tilted on a pillow, stuffed with straw or feathers if you're wealthy. A noble bed might have a carved headboard or padded bolster to lean against, but for peasants, it's just the wall, rough and cold. The seated posture becomes natural even if it leaves your back sore and your neck stiff. This posture wasn't only about health, it was tied to superstition. Many whispered that demons sat on the chests of sleepers, pressing them down. Nightmares weren't just bad dreams. They were real creatures, malicious beings weighing on your lungs. To lie flat was to give them an open invitation. Sitting up, chest lifted, seemed like protection. People spoke of the mare that caused nightmare, a phantom pressing breath from your body. Today, you might call it sleep paralysis, but in the medieval mind, it was a fight with the supernatural. The angle of sleep also spoke to rank and ritual. Nobles receiving visitors in their chambers often sat half reclined in bed, propped up, cloaked in furs, giving orders or hosting conversations. The bed was both a piece of furniture and a throne. You didn't collapse flat. You maintained posture dignity, even in rest. A lord sleeping upright looked ready, alert, commanding. The peasant did it because the ground was cold, and belief said flatness was fatal. Two classes, one posture, different meanings. Let's not forget the practical side. Upright sleeping kept you warmer. In drafty stone castles, lying flat put you directly in the path of icy floor-level breezes. Sitting meant tucking yourself tighter beneath layers of wool closer to the hearth's smoke and heat. Sometimes, wealthier sleepers stuffed their beds with angled supports to make this easier, like primitive recliners. Others simply stacked pillows and leaned until they dozed. For peasants, it was less about design and more about huddling on benches or makeshift cots, their backs against timber walls, while livestock shifted in the same room. The sensory experience was peculiar. Imagine dozing upright, head-drooping muscles tensing to keep you from slipping sideways. The wool itches. Your shoulders ache. The smoky air clogs your lungs, but you endure it because it feels safer than stretching out. You wake often, shifting position, your dreams muddled by the constant awareness of your surroundings. Every creak in the rafters, every gust of wind makes you adjust half alert, never fully surrendered to sleep. From a modern lens, it seems absurd. Who would choose to sleep upright unless trapped on a long-haul flight? Yet medieval people embraced it, and historians still argue whether this habit came from pure superstition, medical doctrine, or a mix of both. Some records describe even royalty being tucked in at an angle. Queenly beds with towering canopies weren't just ornate, they supported the idea that sleeping half-seated was healthier and holier. And of course, religion seeped into the practice. Upright posture mirrored prayer. Sleeping close to a seated position looked less like indulgence and more like vigilance, as though you were spiritually alert. Death could come in your sleep, so why tempt it by lying sprawled and vulnerable? The seated sleeper looked prepared to rise to pray, to resist. It was a way of folding faith into the nightly routine, even in dreams. The quirky detail here is that people also believed sitting upright prevented indigestion. After a heavy supper bread pottage, maybe some ale, the body supposedly digested better if propped up. Today, doctors might recommend avoiding lying down immediately after eating for reflux. Back then, it was exaggerated into a nightly rule sit or suffer. If you've ever tried to sleep after too much pizza, you can almost sympathize, but not everyone agreed. Some physicians of the time hinted that reclining flat allowed the body to rest more fully, though they were in the minority. Scholars debate whether people always slept upright, or if it was a mix, depending on class, age, or illness. Archaeological evidence shows beds long enough for reclining, suggesting not every sleeper was perpetually perched like a tired owl. The truth is, probably messy, as truths often are. Still, the cultural image of upright sleep persisted. Stories, art, and even sermons referred to people resting seated, painting it as ordinary. And for centuries, it shaped how Europe thought about rest. Not comfort, not softness, but protection from sickness spirits and the unseen dangers of the night. You lean back further eyes, heavy body aching, yet convinced this is the safest way to drift off. Fire pops. A dog shifts by the hearth. You pull your cloak tighter, angle your head on the scratchy pillow, and surrender. Half sleep, half watchfulness, propped against the world's dangers, you finally let the dark have you. The night is never one seamless stretch. Instead, it unfolds in two acts, a rhythm so natural to the medieval mind that no one thought it strange. You close your eyes after nightfall, drifting into what they called first sleep. For 3 or 4 hours, your body sinks into a heavy, dream-filled rest. Then, as if summoned, you stir. It is the middle of the night, somewhere between midnight and 2, and almost everyone is awake. The house glows faintly with the dying hearth, and whispers move through the dark. This is not insomnia, it is custom. During this waking period, you might pray, tend to the fire, or simply talk. Peasants could mend tools by the hearth's glow, or check on animals, restless in stalls. Families murmured prayers, asked forgiveness, or whispered stories, their voices low, so as not to wake the children who had managed to keep sleeping. Couples used this quiet interval for intimacy, believing it was the healthiest and most fertile time. Even physicians recommended it. The body refreshed from the first rest was thought ready for its most important work. It is easy to imagine the atmosphere, the flicker of embers, the faint smell of smoke and straw, the hush of a household paused between two worlds. Outside, the village lies still, though a watchman may tramp past his staff, knocking on the stones, reminding you that others too guard the night. If you lived in a monastery, the bells would already be calling for matins, the midnight prayers. Monks shuffle in the dark, chanting in echoing stone chambers, while the rest of the world dozes. After an hour or so, you return to bed, ready for second sleep. This phase is lighter, filled with dreams, but also interruptions, the cough of a child, the stir of animals, the shift of your neighbor on the straw mattress. Second sleep lasts until dawn. When sunlight finally breaks through the shutters, you rise not refreshed exactly, but alive. To medieval people, this broken pattern was normal, a balance between vigilance and rest. Modern science has since found that this segmented sleep isn't unnatural at all. In fact, when people are deprived of artificial light and left in natural darkness, their bodies often fall into the same rhythm, 2 periods of rest divided by a calm waking. In a sense, the medievals were simply obeying their biology even as they clothed it in superstition and ritual. Historians still argue whether everyone practiced first and second sleep, or if it varied by class and season. Some suggest nobles with softer bedding and warmer rooms might have slept longer without waking, while peasants, pressed by cold and hunger, naturally stirred more often. During those midnight hours, the mind wandered. Dreams were shared and dissected. Nightmares were treated as omens, perhaps warnings from saints or whispers from demons. A bad dream could send someone to the church the next morning to seek absolution. A good dream might be celebrated as a blessing. The night was never just rest. It was a negotiation with the invisible. You can picture it now. The fire stirs with a crackle as someone adds another log. The smell of damp wood and smoke fills the air. A baby stirs, a dog yawns, a father sharpens a knife for tomorrow's work. The room is alive yet hushed, like an orchestra tuning between movements. There is no electricity, no sense of rushing the night away. Hours stretch long, and you simply inhabit them. Compared to your world of alarms and 8-hour expectations, it feels almost leisurely. Imagine waking at 1 a.m., reading quietly, then returning to sleep without guilt. In fact, some modern researchers suggest that segmented sleep may have benefits time for reflection, creativity, or intimacy. But for the medievals, it wasn't about self-care. It was necessity shaped by darkness, culture, and belief. A quirky detail emerges from diaries and letters. People often used the waking time to chat with neighbors. In small villages, someone might step outside, see a light across the way, and strike up conversation. Imagine strolling next door at 2 a.m. to borrow salt, and no one think you're insane. For them, the middle of the night was not lonely, but communal. Yet danger always lingered. Thieves and spirits were said to roam most freely during these hours. Doors stayed bolted, charms hung above beds, prayers whispered before lying back down. Even in intimacy or conversation, there was an undercurrent of caution. The night was alive with possibilities good and ill. When you finally return to your second sleep, it feels different. Lighter, more fragile, as though your body knows dawn is coming. Dreams take on a wandering quality, less structured, more surreal. You drift half aware of the cold, creeping back, half comforted by the warmth of family pressed close. Outside, the rooster will soon crow, pulling you back into the waking world. And so, the two-part night completes itself. First, sleep deep and heavy. The midnight waking purposeful and watchful. Second sleep, gentle and strange. It may seem alien to you now, yet it was the heartbeat of medieval nights. The bizarre truth, hidden in the way people endured the darkness. The fire is your lifeline. Without it, the medieval night becomes unbearable cold, damp, and dangerous. A hearth isn't just for cooking. It is the beating heart of the home, the single defense against the freezing dark. But fire is fickle. It eats through wood quickly, and in the 1300s, fuel is precious. You can't afford to let flames blaze all night, nor can you risk them dying completely. So you learn the art of banking the fire. Picture this as the household prepares to settle into their strange posture of upright sleep. Someone kneels at the hearth. They gather glowing embers, cover them with a thick blanket of ash, and tuck small chunks of wood beneath. It looks like suffocating the fire, but really it's teaching it to breathe slowly like a sleeper. Beneath the ash, the embers smolder all night, hidden yet alive, waiting for dawn, when a single breath of air can coax them back into flame. This ritual is so ordinary that no one questions it. To bank the fire is as necessary as locking the door or saying a prayer. Without it, you risk more than cold. A house filled with straw bedding and rushes is tinder, waiting for disaster. Too much flame, and the family burns in their sleep. Too little, and they wake stiff and frostbitten. Banking is the compromise, the careful balance between life and death.
May the Lord support
The
us
sensory
all
experience
day
of it
long,
lingers in your
until
nose
the
and
shadows
clothes.
lengthen and the
The
evening
air
comes.
tastes of ash, your skin prickles with dry heat on one side and chill on the other. Sparks hiss when you shift the wood, tiny red stars fading into darkness. The smell clings, smoke mixed with damp wool, a perfume of survival. In the silence of night, that faint glow becomes a kind of company. Children watch the embers as they fall asleep, tracing shapes in the faint red light, like modern kids staring at night lights. For the poor firewood is scarce. Families gather sticks, dung, or peat from the fields, anything that will burn. Peat gives a heavy, earthy smoke. Dung smolders with a bitter stench. In wealthy homes, oak and beech logs feed the hearth, producing steadier, longer-lasting embers. The contrast is stark. A noble hall glows faintly warm through the night, while a peasant hut shivers around a meager, smoky pile. Yet both depend on the same act of preservation, keeping the fire from dying. There is also fear of what happens if the fire goes out. Relighting it isn't as simple as striking a match. You must fetch flint and steel strike sparks onto dry tinder and nurse them carefully. In winter, with numb fingers and damp wood, this is no easy feat. Villages sometimes kept a communal fire tended constantly, so that anyone whose hearth went dark could carry home a burning brand. Fire in this sense was not just heat, but community as shared survival tool. Banking the fire wasn't purely practical, it carried symbolic weight. Fire was sacred, tied to divine protection. Some households murmured prayers while covering the embers, asking saints to guard the flame through the night. Others believed spirits lived in the hearth itself, and disturbing them would bring bad luck. Quirky charms, iron tongs, crossed bread, left on the mantle, were meant to appease these invisible guardians. A banked fire was not merely coals under ash. It was a spiritual contract, a pact with warmth and safety. As you watch the embers dim, the room falls into shadow. The family huddles under cloaks and blankets, glancing now and then at the faint glow to be sure it still breathes. A medieval night without fire feels unthinkable, like a modern blackout in the dead of winter, but with no electric rescue waiting. The fear presses on your chest. Will the embers last? Will you wake shivering in the black cold? Every crackle is a reassurance, every puff of smoke a reminder that life continues. Historians still argue whether banking was a universally known skill or one passed down in specific regions. Some records describe women as the primary tenders of the hearth entrusted with guarding the coals, while in other places it was the duty of whoever stayed up latest. The practice appears in court records too, because a poorly banked fire could spread, consuming a thatched roof and leaping to neighbors' houses. Fire was friend and enemy, gift and threat. And here is a quirky tidbit. In some villages, embers were considered so precious that people paid debts with them. To give a glowing coal was to share life. It's not unlike lending someone a phone charger today, mundane, yet absolutely essential. Only in this case, failing to borrow correctly could mean freezing to death. As you sit upright on your lumpy bed, you notice how every sense is tied to the fire. The sight of its glow, the smell of smoke, the warmth against your skin, even the sounds, the hiss of sap, the occasional crack of a log become part of your lullaby. Without these cues, the night feels wrong. The fire's rhythm matches your own smoldering, waiting for dawn. When morning finally comes, someone rakes the ashes aside, revealing the orange glow beneath. A single puff of breath, a few twigs, and flame leaps up again, triumphant. The relief is palpable. You have made it through another night, thanks to the simple art of teaching fire how to sleep. And so the pattern continues night after night. The fire, like you, never truly rests. It shifts size and waits beneath the ash, a quiet reminder that in the 1300s, survival depended on knowing how to keep even flames asleep without letting them die. You never really sleep alone in the 1300s. Privacy is a luxury no one can afford, not even nobles. For peasants, the one-room house is crowded. Parents, children, cousins, and sometimes grandparents all share the same space. The bed, if there is one, is not for a single body. It's a patch of straw wide enough for several, with everyone arranged like sardines, knees, knocking elbows, jabbing breaths, mingling in the cold. If you've ever tried falling asleep in a crowded train carriage, multiply that by 10, and you'll have some idea of medieval bedrooms. The reasoning is simple warmth. Stone walls bleed cold, thatch roofs leak drafts, and wooden shutters barely block the wind. To sleep apart is to freeze. So you huddle together, piling cloaks, wool blankets, or whatever rags you own, using the press of other bodies as insulation. Families often tuck the youngest children in the middle, safe between parents, while older children and extended kin lay along the edges. The idea was practical. Protect the vulnerable, share the heat, endure the night as a unit. But people weren't the only bedfellows. Animals shared the room too. Chickens clucked softly from rafters, pigs grunted in pens by the wall, cows breathed heavy in the corner. Their warmth raised the room's temperature a few precious degrees. You might wrinkle your nose at the smell, but in winter, the hot breath of livestock could mean survival. Some families even let goats or lambs climb onto straw bedding, treating them almost like extra blankets. The sensory experience is unforgettable. The air is thick with smoke sweat and animal musk. The straw beneath you crackles as everyone shifts. Fleas hop between hosts without discrimination. Snores rumble like thunder, punctuated by the occasional squeal of a pig or the cough of a child. There is no silence, no solitude, only the living hum of bodies pressed close. If modern sleep doctors preach cool, dark quiet, the medieval ideal is warm, crowded, noisy. This communal sleep shapes behavior. You learn to ignore discomfort, to sleep through chatter, to accept that someone else's feet might end up on your chest. Privacy, modesty, and personal space bend under the weight of necessity. For peasants, sharing a bed wasn't shameful, it was survival. Even nobles, though they had larger rooms, often shared with attendants or guards. A lord might rest in his curtained bed, while a servant snored nearby on a bench. Kings hosted entire councils in their chambers, courtiers lounging near the royal bed. Sleep was public, communal, and anything but private. Of course, this closeness created problems. Illness spread easily. A single feverish cough could ripple through a household within days. Lice and fleas thrived. Bedbugs, once introduced, became impossible to eradicate. Families lived in constant contact, and disease made no distinction. Still, the alternative, sleeping alone in the cold, was worse. To medieval minds, discomfort was tolerable if it meant waking alive. Historians still argue how much intimacy these arrangements encouraged or discouraged. Some suggest families grew more emotionally bonded by their nightly closeness. Others point to complaints in sermons and letters about inappropriate behavior, gossip, or tensions born from too much togetherness. A quirky detail from some records shows innkeepers renting out beds to multiple strangers at once. Travelers could find themselves sleeping shoulder to shoulder with people they'd never met, trusting that the cover of darkness and shared misery would keep everyone civil. Imagine checking into a hotel and being told you'll share your mattress with 2 other guests. It was not unusual then. The idea of crowding extended to timing too. Remember, the first sleep and second sleep. In the waking interval between families sometimes talked, prayed, or even argued. Secrets could slip out in whispers while the embers glowed and animals shifted in their pens. Sleep wasn't just about rest, it was a social space where lives overlapped in ways both comforting and claustrophobic. Modern comparisons highlight how alien this feels. Today, people buy noise machines, blackout curtains, and queen-sized mattresses just to guarantee solitude. Back then, solitude was suspicious. To sleep alone meant you were vulnerable, unprotected by the warmth and watchfulness of others. Togetherness was safety, even if it meant scratching at fleas and enduring the symphony of snores. The quirkiest part might be how normalized this was. Children grew up never knowing a private bed, adults accepted strangers in inns without question, and nobles conducted politics in their sleeping chambers. What you'd call a bedroom was more like a stage for survival work and community. You shift on the straw elbow, nudging against your brother's ribs, the pig snort echoing in the background, the draft slipping through the shutters. It is cramped, smelly, and loud, but it is life. In the 1300s, sleep is never a solitary act. It is a communal performance where warmth and survival outweigh comfort and privacy. And somehow, amid the chaos, you close your eyes and drift. If the peasant's night is spent in noisy, crowded huts, the noble's night offers another kind of strangeness. Step into a lord's chamber, and you'll see beds that look more like stages than places of rest. High wooden frames dominate the room, carved with saints' vines or heraldic beasts. Draped around them are heavy curtains and rich canopies, thick wool velvet or brocade, forming a private world inside the drafty hall. These curtains are not decoration alone, they are survival. Castles are stone shells magnificent by day, but merciless by night. Cold air snakes through gaps and walls hold damp like sponges. Without curtains, even a feather bed becomes an icebox. So nobles drew heavy draperies around their sleeping places, sealing in warmth like a cocoon. Step inside, and the air changes warmer, stiller smelling of wool and smoke. The canopy above doesn't just add grandeur, it traps heat, turns the bed into a microclimate. The curtains also shield against more than cold. They keep out vermin scuttling across the floor, and perhaps more importantly, curious eyes. Because remember, noble chambers were not private sanctuaries. Servants moved in and out, courtiers might gather, near guards slept in corners. The bed was both throne and stage, and privacy was a rare luxury. Draw the curtains, and suddenly you could breathe without the weight of an audience. It was as much about dignity as comfort. But even behind the curtains, life was not silent. Drafts whispered at the edges. Firelight flickered through the fabric, and the sounds of a bustling household carried on. You might hear servants stoking fires below, dogs barking in the yard, or even the clatter of late-night guards in armor. The bed canopy softened these noises, turning them into muffled background hums, but never erasing them completely. And here's the curious part. These elaborate beds were often portable. Nobles traveled with their canopied frames, dismantling and reassembling them wherever they lodged. To sleep without your curtains was to risk both health and honor. A portable bed carried by servants became a symbol of wealth, proof that even the coldest inn could be transformed into a chamber of status. Imagine checking into a hotel today and insisting your staff reassemble your entire four-poster bed before you settle in. That was the medieval aristocrat's version of comfort. The sensory impression of these curtained beds is striking. Step inside and the smell of fabric surrounds you, dyes of indigo or crimson faintly musty from damp. The air is warmer, but also heavier, thick with breath and smoke that cannot easily escape. The feel of the fabric brushing your fingers, the dim light filtering through embroidered panels, creates the sense of being enclosed in a small, private world. It is both comforting and claustrophobic. Nobles invested fortunes in these beds, treating them as heirlooms. Records show beds gifted in wills passed down through generations like crowns. A grand canopy was not only a sleeping tool, but a declaration of power. Here lies someone who commands warmth, privacy, and dignity. In contrast, peasants might sleep on bare boards or rushes, but the idea of curtains belonged almost exclusively to the wealthy. Still, even grandeur had limits. Fleas did not respect velvet. Bedbugs crawled just as happily through embroidery as straw. Some nobles sprinkled herbs, lavender, rosemary, mint between the sheets to mask odors and deter pests. Others relied on laundresses to beat and air the linens, though this happened less often than you'd hope. The irony is clear. You could be wrapped in gold-threaded brocade and still scratch at bites all night. Historians still argue whether curtains were more about warmth or display. Some suggest they began as practical shields against cold, while others see them as stages for ritual. After all, births, deaths, and even audiences with monarchs sometimes occurred at the bedside. Curtains could be drawn back for ceremony, then closed again for intimacy. The bed was not just furniture, it was a theater, and the canopy its curtain in every sense of the word. Think about modern parallels. Today, people buy blackout curtains to block light sound machines, to mask noise, and climate control to maintain comfort. The medieval noble tried to achieve all that with fabric and wood. It was the ancient version of a sleep pod, a low-tech attempt to create control in a world full of drafty uncertainty. A quirky tidbit, some canopies were painted underneath with stars or religious imagery. So when you lay back, you gazed at a miniature heaven. It was a way of sanctifying the sleep space, of reminding the sleeper that even in rest, the divine watched over them. It's not unlike sticking glow-in-the-dark stars on your ceiling today, except these cost a fortune and carried eternal weight. As you settle into the curtained cocoon, the difference is immediate. Outside the fabric, the chamber is echoing stone cold and vast. Inside, the world shrinks to a pocket of warmth and dim light. You hear the muffled snores of servants, the distant baying of hounds, but they feel far away. For a moment, the bed becomes its own fortress, guarding against the chill and chaos of the night. And yet even in this fortress, you sleep half upright, propped against pillows, aware that the dark beyond the curtains is alive with whispers, drafts, and the ever-present possibility of danger. In the medieval night, no bed, no matter how grand, was completely safe. But within the folds of fabric and the glow of embroidered panels, you find enough warmth, enough privacy to let your eyes close. You pull the curtains tighter, but even here in your makeshift cocoon, the night presses in. To medieval minds, the darkness outside wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. They feared something called the night air, a vaporous threat that could seep through shutters and creep through under doors, bringing illness with every draft. To breathe too deeply of this air was to invite fever, plague, or death. And so the entire rhythm of sleeping upright, banking fires, and huddling close made sense within this belief the night itself was poisoned. Why such fear? Partly, it was medical theory. Doctors of the 1300s followed Galen's humoral model, where sickness arose from imbalances of bodily fluids. Air, they believed, carried vapors that corrupted those humors. During daylight, breezes seemed clean, warmed by the sun. But after sunset, the air was heavy damp and filled with miasma, poisonous bad air. To breathe it, lying flat, chest open, was almost an act of suicide. Practical experience reinforced the superstition. Many diseases peaked at night. Plague, cholera, fevers all seemed to worsen after sunset. People coughing or wheezing in their beds gave the impression that darkness itself carried the sickness. Add to this the chill of winter nights when breathing cold air really could cause discomfort or bronchitis, and the myth of night air became entrenched. Curtains, closed windows, and even stuffing cracks with rags or straw were defenses not just against the cold, but against invisible death. The sensory reality was convincing. Step into a medieval street after sundown, and the smells overwhelm you. Sewage trickling through open ditches, refuse left to rot, smoke clinging to the damp. A single whiff might be enough to make you cough, reinforcing the idea that nighttime air was toxic. Indoors, the smoky hearth at least smelled familiar, even if it irritated the lungs. Compared to the stink outside the haze, inside felt safer. It's a little like preferring the smell of burnt popcorn in your apartment to the stench of city garbage trucks outside, both unpleasant, but one more tolerable. This fear shaped daily life. Windows were shuttered at dusk, doors barred tight, and children scolded for letting the air in. Herbs were hung to purify the atmosphere: rosemary, sage, lavender. Nobles burned perfumed wood or incense, filling their chambers with thick clouds believed to push back corruption. Peasants stuffed herbs into cracks or simply relied on smoke from their hearth to drive away bad vapors. If you've ever lit a scented candle to mask a foul odor, you're echoing their logic, though theirs was infused with life or death urgency. Historians still argue how much of this fear was rooted in genuine observation. Some say it was mostly superstition, a desperate explanation for sicknesses people couldn't understand. Others point out that avoiding damp night air might have had real benefits. After all, keeping warm, shutting out drafts, and burning herbs could reduce exposure to fleas or airborne irritants. The line between myth and practical survival was blurry. Quirky details abound. In some towns, it was believed that yawning with your mouth open at night allowed disease to fly in. Others thought that dreams themselves could be corrupted by foul air twisting your sleep with demonic visions. Wealthy households sometimes assigned servants to test the air, stepping outside briefly and reporting whether it was safe to open a shutter for a moment. Imagine hiring someone to sniff the breeze before you dared crack a window. The fear of night air even seeped into architecture. Houses were built with tiny windows easily shuttered. Thick draperies hung not just for warmth, but as filters. In cities, curfews limited movement after dark, partly from fear of crime, but also to keep people from breathing too much of the dangerous atmosphere. Night belonged to spirits, thieves, and sickness. Staying indoors, sealed tight, felt like self-defense, and yet the irony was thick. The safe, smoky rooms were filled with carbon and soot that surely damaged lungs more than the outside air. Children wheezed, adults coughed, and yet people clung to the belief that their sealed, smoky chamber was a fortress against corruption. To them, discomfort was proof of safety. If the air burned your eyes but smelled of rosemary, it must be clean. The modern parallel is uncanny. Think of how people obsess today over air purifiers, scented sprays, or filters. We know more about germs, but the instinct is the same. The air feels dangerous, so we control it however we can. The medieval obsession with night air may look foolish, but in its own way, it rhymes with your world's anxieties about pollution smog or even viruses carried in droplets. As you sit propped against your bolster blanket drawn to your chin, you listen to the hush beyond the curtains. The fire mutters low. A faint draft teases at the fabric, and your breath quickens. Is it cold air or sickness slipping in? You close your eyes, pretending the heavy smell of lavender sachets is enough protection. And as the night stretches on, you realize that in this age, fear itself is as present in the room as the embers glowing on the hearth. Close your eyes in the 1300s, and dreams are not private fancies. They are messages, warnings, even battles fought with unseen forces. Sleep itself is dangerous, and the visions it brings are treated with suspicion. If the day belongs to toil and ritual, the night belongs to dreams and nightmares, and these can shape the choices of an entire household come morning. The medieval mind doesn't separate science superstition and faith the way yours does. Dreams are real tangible things. They come from God, or the saints, or far more frightening, the devil himself. A dream of a golden field could be read as a blessing, a sign of prosperity. A dream of drowning might be a prophecy of illness or death. People record them in letters, confess them to priests, or discuss them during the midnight waking between first sleep and second sleep. What you see in your dreams could mark you for good or ill. Nightmares, in particular, terrify. They are not dismissed as tricks of the mind, but physical assaults by spirits. The nightmare, a demonic being, was said to sit on your chest, crushing the breath from your lungs. People woke gasping, paralyzed, convinced they had survived an attack. Today, you might call it sleep paralysis, but for them, it was a brush with the supernatural. Some describe dark figures at the edge of the bed or pressure on their limbs, proof that spirits had been prowling. It was not your imagination. It was war. The sensory details of these dreams bled into waking life. You might wake drenched in sweat sheets, tangled heart racing. The smoky air of the room feels heavy, as though the dream's weight lingers. Your family huddled nearby. You stir whispering prayers, making the sign of the cross, or burning herbs to cleanse the air. Even the smell of lavender or rosemary feels like armor against invisible invaders. Dream interpreters thrived in this world. Collections of dream guides circulated offering explanations. To dream of teeth falling meant death in the family. To dream of fire was passion or wrath. To dream of water was change, sometimes good, sometimes ruin. Ordinary people consulted these guides like manuals, searching for meaning in the shadows of sleep. Historians still argue whether these books were widespread among peasants or confined to literate elites, but the underlying truth is clear dreams were maps of the future. Religious institutions leaned heavily into this. Monks preached about the dangers of sinful visions, urging confession for impure dreams. Saints were said to appear in sleep, delivering warnings or miracles. A noble might boast of a dream that foretold victory in battle, framing it as divine endorsement. The line between personal vision and public prophecy was thin. One man's nightmare could become an entire village's omen. Quirky details add color. Some believed cheese before bed caused nightmares, while herbs
See
like
the path
poppy or
laid
valerian
bare
could
before us.
invite peaceful dreams. Others placed iron knives or crucifixes near the bed to ward off night demons. Even the position of sleep mattered. Lying on your back was said to invite evil visions, while curling on your side kept you safer. Upright sleeping, already common, doubled as a way to fend off nightmares. From a modern angle, it almost sounds like a collective sleep study experiment gone wrong. You wake with indigestion and call it a demon. You experience sleep paralysis and believe it's a spirit. You dream of falling, and instead of shrugging, you brace for disaster the next day. But remember, this was a world with few explanations for illness, sudden death, or disaster. Dreams filled the gap. They gave shape to fear and offered a way, however flawed, to prepare. This belief shaped daily choices. A farmer might delay planting if his dreams were ominous. A noble could change travel plans based on a troubling vision. Entire battles were postponed or hastened because a leader claimed a dream demanded it. The practical world bent to the strange dictates of the sleeping mind. Think of it this way. You check your phone each morning to see the news, the weather, or your calendar. Medieval people woke and checked their dreams. These were their headlines, their forecasts, their instructions for the day. Strange, yes, but in a way, it was their logic. The eerie thing is how often these experiences mirrored real phenomena. Bad air indigestion, cramped posture, or fevers could cause hallucinations. The sensations of pressure paralysis and fear are real even today. Modern medicine names them. Medieval minds gave them personalities, demons, and divine messengers. Different language, same experience. And so, as you drift in that dim, smoky chamber, body propped upright, you dream. Shapes blur, voices whisper shadows, lean close. You wake with a jolt, heart pounding, certain you weren't alone. Your family stirs, reassures you, maybe prays over you. But deep down, everyone knows the night is never just sleep. It is a battlefield of the unseen, where spirits, saints, and demons pass freely. In the morning, you will remember the dream and weigh its meaning. Was it a warning, a blessing, a trick? Your day may be shaped by the answer. And as the cycle repeats, dream after dream, nightmare after nightmare, the medieval night remains not just bizarre, but profoundly haunted. Midnight is never silent in a medieval town. Long before mechanical clocks chimed the hours, the night was divided by the steady rhythm of bells, cries, and footsteps. You lie in your bed, half upright, crowded with family smoke, lingering in your nose, and outside the world keeps watch. These are the watchman's hours, and their sounds are the pulse of the night. Every town, even the smallest, had some system of guarding against fire thieves and mischief. In larger cities, professional watchmen patrolled the streets, carrying staff's lanterns or even small horns. Their job was to keep order while everyone else slept. They called out the hours, sometimes singing or chanting, announcing all's well, to reassure or to warn. For you tucked in straw or beneath a canopy, those voices are both comforting and unnerving. Comforting because it means someone is awake while you rest. Unnerving because their very presence reminds you that danger lurks. The sounds layer into a strange symphony. A bell tolls from the church, marking matins for monks. A watchman's staff taps rhythmically against cobblestones. Dogs bark at the movement. Somewhere in the distance, a drunkard yells, answered by shushing voices. The air is never truly still. Each sound travels through narrow, crooked streets, echoing off stone, drifting through shutters into your restless dreams. Watchmen were more than timekeepers. They were enforcers of curfew. In many towns, commoners were forbidden to roam after dark unless on urgent business. Anyone caught wandering risked being fined, questioned, or even jailed. Lantern light sweeping across the street could expose secrets, an illicit meeting, a thief sneaking home, or simply someone desperate to fetch a midwife. You snug in your shared bed, know that only the desperate or the reckless tempt the watchman's hours. Still, their role wasn't glamorous. Many were poorly paid, ill-equipped, and resented by townsfolk. Some fell asleep, on duty leaning against doorways until morning. Others were mocked in songs as bumbling or corrupt. Yet they remained essential. Fires were common, spreading fast through thatch and timber. Without watchmen, whole districts could burn before dawn. Thieves, too, prowled most freely at night, cutting purses or raiding storerooms. The watchman's cry was a fragile barrier against chaos. Inside monasteries, the watch of the night was different, but equally strict. Bells rang at intervals, calling monks to prayer. Matins, then lauds, broke the darkness with chanting that echoed across valleys. For nearby peasants, those voices drifting through the night were eerie yet reassuring. While demons haunted dreams and thieves haunted alleys, the monks stood as guardians